Very good evening. Jai Shri Krishna Guru. Thank you for joining the Bhagavad Gita Satsang, the way of life as described by Lord Shri Krishna to Arjuna. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha, Om Shri Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Shri Saraswataya Namaha, Om Shri Guru Dattatreya Namaha, Om Shri Mahalakshmiye Namaha. Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha, Guru Sakshat Parabrahma, Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. We'll be continuing from chapter 6 onwards, that is the Yoga of Self-Control, and we will be learning about urging one to uplift the self, marks of the God-realized soul. Chapter 6, verse 6 onwards. But just a quick recap before that. Yesterday, in the last satsang, we learnt about how Lord Shri Krishna is teaching Arjuna a very, 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 very important lesson. And that is about how one should lift oneself by one's own efforts, that is self-effort, and should not degrade oneself. For one's own self is one's best friend and one's own self is one's worst enemy. See, we human beings have a very interesting nature to either, degrade ourselves, become a martyr, or become elated about our own self. So we are constantly in this yo-yo. But most important thing is you should not degrade yourself. Oh, I am the one who doesn't know. I am the one who's at fault. The martyrdom comes into existence very, very easily. The moment, say example, if your guru is teaching you something, he's pointing your mistakes, doesn't mean you're bad, or doesn't mean that, you're a worst being on this planet Earth. The reason why he's teaching you is to help you uplift yourself so that you can become the better version of yourself. Instead, what we do is we go into this martyrdom. Yeah, I am only bad. I am only like this. Everybody is good in this world. Have you heard yourself say these things? Whenever either your parent or your teacher or somebody is correcting you, you end up feeling this state, feeling miserable. But on the contrary, if you were to understand whatever is being taught is for your own good, so that you can better yourself, then you're going to use the same, teachings, that is the knowledge which your Guruji is pointing to you. It could be your guru, your mentor, whosoever is guiding you in your life. That somebody who points out your mistakes, you will actually, be very thankful to that person or that individual, or to a master who wants you to perfect. Because please remember, in this world, people will only, give you false praises. They are not interested in your upliftment. They just want to pander to you so that they can get your work done. But only very few in this world who wants your well-being will not pander to you. They are not going to praise you when you do something good in this world. On the contrary, they will just say, okay, fine, you've done good, move on, what next? It's okay. Yeah, your performance is okay. Like my Guruji will always say, if you ask him, how did I do? Okay, so what? Move on. You have a long way to go. The other day I was asking something to my Krishna Guruji. I was telling him, I was a little worried about this year. I know I have to cross certain milestones, both in my professional, my personal and spiritual world. And I know I am a little way behind. Can you give me an understanding as to what is the things that I have to progress, or where do I stand? He's not going to tell me what I did well. On the contrary, he only told me where I lacked and what is that I can do better. This is the real master's way of teaching. He's never going to praise his disciple or devotee. Oh, you're my greatest devotee. He's never going to utter those words. Forget it if you're expecting something like that. And he's never going to praise his disciple saying, okay, this is my best disciple. He will never praise in front of you. At least in front of you, he will never utter those words from his mouth. He will only say how worst a being you are. That is his way of, helping you to make you progress. But if you take his words personally, and if it hurts your ego, let me tell you, you are never going to empower or uplift yourself. So what happens then? Yourself becomes your own worst enemy, because you're thinking he's talking about this body, how bad you are. No, he's only saying you can better yourself. The reason why we have to understand where we are faltering is because we can better ourselves. But this understanding doesn't come to a human being, and that is why Lord Shri Krishna is teaching here. See, the knowledge is what he's imparting to Arjuna, but he's saying one should lift oneself by one's own effort. So if you don't lift yourself with your own effort, when, say example, my Guruji said, you have to, calm down a bit. Your anger has to be still controlled. What does that mean? He says, yeah, you have been able to, control from, say, if it's from 1 to 10, in a scale of 1 to 10, you have been able to control up to 5, which means 50% you have been able to control. There's another 50% for you to improve. That doesn't mean I am a bad person. No, he's only pointing out that I have still a long way to go, which means I need to put more effort. So if you don't understand where you stand, how will you become the best version of yourself? How will you become the divine being? You cannot. So take any of these teachings, the lesson, the feedback in a constructive manner. That is why we say it's a constructive criticism or it's a constructive feedback. So feedback has to be taken very positively so that you can better yourself. There is nothing to be personal about. See, nobody is perfect. What does that mean? Nobody is perfect means nobody is perfect. Anything which is created always has its own defects in itself. So every human being is fallible in nature and they have their own inherent nature which is very difficult for them to overcome. But since you are on the path of spiritual, especially for those on the path of spiritual and who has a guru in their life, who are learning under the tutelage of a real master, you better buck up. You can't tell the guru, oh, I can't do this, I cannot do this. No, you are there for a certain reason. You have been blessed. It is very it's a privilege. We don't understand the value and the importance of having a real master in our life, the real guru who will enable you, who will empower you to achieve your goal, the ultimate goal in life. But it all depends on your own self-effort. The guru can only give you the knowledge. He can guide you. He's the guiding light. He's a helmsman who can cross you across the shore. But you have to walk that path. It's like, you're going to climb Mount Everest. There is a guide, right? You can't on your own climb the Mount Everest because you don't know where are the obstacles or the, bottlenecks where you have to be very careful about. So this guru is like that. He's going to guide you. He's giving you the knowledge. He's holding your hand and walking you through that path. But it is for you to put that effort to walk that path, holding his hand. If you use your mind and you say, oh, you think you know too much and you do something else, you're going to fall from wherever you are. And that fall is, it's quite a fall. Please remember, when you fall from that highest peak, what happens? The impact is huge. Because after all that effort, when you fall down, you're going to again rock bottoms. What does that mean? Then you have to put 100 times more the effort to climb all the way up again. So it's not an easy feat. So don't take your life for granted. Use this opportunity to become the best version of yourself. And what is Lord Shri Krishna telling Arjuna? That it is Arjuna who has to put his self-effort. You and me are that Arjuna in this world. We have to strive hard. He makes it very clear to Arjuna, strive to practice the yoga of equanimity. You be self-control, Arjuna. He's not saying someone else has to do it. Who has to do it? Arjuna has to do it. Here also he's saying that I have to, this self of me, myself, I have to put my self-effort to uplift myself. And one should not degrade oneself. Means we should never degrade ourselves. Because when we, give all the negatives, we become that. So never say anything negative about yourself. You should recognize that yes, you have certain tendencies, certain inherent nature, certain qualities which you have to overcome. So work hard to overcome. And then what is he saying? For one's own self is one's own friend, best friend, and one's own self is one's worst enemy. So either you can be your best friend or your worst enemy. The choice rests with you alone. Who do you want to be? So this was just a quick recap, because in continuation that let us see what Lord Shri Krishna is further teaching Arjuna. So chapter 6 verse 6. One's own self is the friend of the soul by whom the lower self consisting of the mind, senses and body has been conquered. Even so, the very self of him who has not conquered his lower self behaves antagonistically like an enemy. Wow, this is very, very powerful. Let us understand what is he teaching Arjuna here. One's own self is the friend of the soul, by whom the lower self, consisting of mind, senses and body, has been conquered. So one's own self here, the self is represented with capital S, is the friend of the soul. What does this mean? The higher self, which is the divine self within us. We said, right? Self-realization. We say that. You have to achieve self-realization. That self, the capital S, is the soul, is the friend of the soul, by whom the lower self consisting of mind, senses, body has been conquered. Which is, I have been able to conquer my lower self by rising above, by this, the friend within us, which is the higher self. Now, what does that mean? In the last few chapters, we have been learning something very important. How to control our mind, body, senses and overcome the pairs of opposites as well. So he has given various methods, and in the last chapter he said few things which is very, very critical, which was how to, control the urges of lust and anger and give up the desires and fear. See, a man and human beings are driven by what is called fear. Fear of what is going to happen to me tomorrow, fear of death, fear of uncertainties of life. We are very fearful beings. So we don't want to do anything which will jeopardy our life. We like to be in the comfort zone at all times. We don't want to take risks in our life. We don't know what is going to happen. So we are afraid of everything in this world, and that is why we cannot grow. And that fear drives us to doing all the wrong things, which is what the mind wants. So who is causing you the fear? The fear, where do you feel the fear? The fear is felt in the mind. Who's fearful? It is the mind who is fearful. It is not the self which is fearful. See, when you understand your oneness, so when you understand your oneness with the Divine Lord, in that state, in that yoga, that is union with the Divine Lord, you are not going to be afraid. You know the truth that the Divine Lord is going to take care of everything. Everything is already predetermined, predefined and predestined. So what is that? What is there to fear of? Sai Baba always says these beautiful words. Why fear when I am here? That is the truth. When Lord Shri Krishna is with you, why are you afraid of? This morning I was telling my Guruji about certain things that I was learning. And I was a little disturbed with what is happening in this world. And I was telling him, why is there so much of exploitation? And he just gave a very beautiful answer. He said, see, everything is meant to be going towards destruction, because this is Kali Yuga. And we are in the age of Kali. We can't do anything about it, but we can be our good self. We can make a difference to those who want to, be saved. Those who want to, evolve on the path of dharma, that is righteousness. And he said, we are not here to change anybody. We have to become the best version of ourselves. And those who come to us, we will enable them to whatever capacity we can, and how much of effort they put. See, again, it all comes back to one's own effort. How much are you willing to walk that path? How much transformation do you seek? That rests with you alone. Nobody can do this for you. And then he said, please remember, this world is an illusion. Everything is Maya. Why are you getting carried away by what you see? Understand the truth that everything is just an illusion alone. All this is unreal. You know how powerful that is? You feel whatever you see or experience in the material world is actually happening. But we forget that state, we forget that truth, that everything is unreal in the material world. It is like you're dreaming. This whole, illusion that you experience is just a dream. The moment you wake up to that truth, this world doesn't exist. But to understanding that, you have to first evolve. You have to get that self-realization. Till the time you don't get that self-realization or God realization, you cannot understand this world is just an illusion of Maya. And we will always keep feeling everything that is happening is very real. And this is where we will fail. So he's saying one's own self is the friend of the soul by whom the lower self, comprising of mind, senses, and body, has been conquered. You know, my Guruji teaches all of us one very important lesson, so very basic lesson. You have to wake up at certain time in the early morning. You know, you fix a time, whether it is 4 a.m., 4:30, 4:45, 5, whatever the time you fix. Every single day, clockwork precision, you have to wake up. Let me tell you, even after 12 years, we do falter. We don't wake up at that precise hour. We don't. Why? Because we are given into our mind, senses, and body. We are unable to overcome. But what is that you have to do? In the earlier verse, he teaches one's own self is one's own best friend. So you have to use that divine power within you, that higher self, to conquer the lower self. So how do you do that? You need to have that amount of effort, that will to do. It all begins with you only. Only you can do that. Nobody else can walk this path for you. So how long are you going to take to achieve that consistency in your life? See, the problem with us human being, this body, is that we are never consistent in anything that we do. And that is where we fail. So my Guruji says, what can I expect today in this age of Kali? Everybody is either below mediocre or below, it's not even mediocre, they're below average. They're not even average or above average, they're below average. They are going in minus. So how do you tell this being to become disciplined? Nobody wants to put that effort. Everybody wants it easy. They want to become lazy. They want to be in the tamasic gunas constantly. They don't want to grow anywhere. They don't want to do anything. I'm not joking. Something very interesting I'm experiencing of late. I'm following up with few people to get certain things done. Some job to be done. And it has taken me more than 3 weeks to follow up to get one contact, for a call to happen. And the person every single day gives me an interesting amount of reasons why that a simple task could not be performed. Just sharing a contact was not done because the person is very busy. No, it's about laziness, that ability to just do it. We don't want to do it. We procrastinate. Oh, I'll do it tomorrow, day after, day after. See, what they forget to understand is that the same thing is going to happen to you. My Guruji will always teach us all one very important lesson. When you give me reasons, the universe will also give you reasons. Imagine if you have to, today, first of every month you're working. Now, if you don't get your salary paid on time, don't you think that's going to affect you? Because you have to pay your bills, you have your EMIs, you have to take care of your family. There's so many requirements that you have. But if God doesn't give you that salary in time, you're going to be suffering. So why don't you think that it is your duty also to do things in time? And this one lesson, we don't get it. But someday in life, the universe is going to give back the same thing what you're giving. So be very careful how you behave and how you do and work things in this world. Because that is the same thing that's going to come back to you. Why don't you understand? We don't realize this. We take things, for granted. We do things in our own sweet time. And many a time, what happens is we are living in our own mind, the muck of our mind. And the mind creates too many things for you. All the unwanted nonsense it keeps throwing up, where it is not allowing you to perform. So who has to put in effort to, conquer the mind, senses and the body? It is our own self. Only I can do it for me. You or anybody else cannot do it for me. Even Lord Sri Krishna cannot do. Why? Because he can only give knowledge. He is only a witness within us. He is the self. But we have to empower the divine Lord by giving him the reins of our life. He is the charioteer. Don't forget this. He runs this body. He is the charioteer of everybody. Lord Sri Krishna says, I reside in the heart of all beings. But everybody covers me up with ignorance. They cover me up completely. And how do you uncover? With the grace of the Guru who's imparting you this knowledge, and the knowledge, can cut asunder the ignorance. So you have to use the sword of the knowledge to cut asunder the ignorance and evolve. Till the time you're going to be suffering like this, there is no way out. So the answer is, you have to uplift yourself only by your own self-effort. Nobody else can do this for you. So the choice rests purely with you alone. Even so, the very self of him who has not conquered his lower self behaves antagonistically like an enemy. Oh my God, this is very true. What is Lord Shri Krishna teaching here to Arjuna? Even so, the very self of him, the self is here the divine self, who has not conquered his lower self, behaves antagonistically like an enemy. So it's always opposing you, because you have not been able to conquer. Have you heard yourself within? There is a very beautiful, there's a soft voice which always tells you what is the right thing to do. But there is a overpowering voice which says, no, don't listen to that, you do this, it will always tell you the opposite of what your divine self tells. That small voice, the first thought that comes is always a divine, it's from the divine source. That's from the divine self alone. Please remember. And anything followed by that is your lower self, which wants to overpower. And so what does it do? It behaves antagonistically like an enemy. Why? Because you're not able to conquer it. So we have understood the methods as to how should we conquer all of that. But if we do not apply, if we do not do this, you're always going to suffer miserably, and your lower self is always going to behave antagonistically like an enemy. And what happens then? It takes you to the ruins. That's exactly what happens. And you're going to be born again and again and suffering the same misery of this human existence. Not necessarily you'll have a human birth, but you'll be born as an animal, whether it is sentient or insentient beings, you will be born as any of those, depending on the karma that you perform. So why do you need that kind of a life? When God has blessed you with this human birth, why don't you go towards God realization so that you can redeem yourself and the people associated with you? So let us continue. The Supreme Spirit is rooted in the knowledge of the self-controlled man whose mind is perfectly serene in the midst of pairs of opposites such as cold and heat, joy and sorrow, and honor and ignominy. Wow, this is very powerful. He's teaching the same thing. There's nothing that is telling new. Let us understand what is he saying. The Supreme Spirit is rooted in the knowledge of the self-controlled man whose mind is perfectly serene in the midst of pairs of opposites such as cold and heat, joy and sorrow, honor and ignominy. What does that mean? Chapter 2, Lord Shri Krishna has already imparted this lesson. Arjuna, strive to practice to achieve the yoga of equanimity. Where is that equanimity that you're achieving? You are not able to. Our mind does yo-yo in no time. The moment you see an object, whether that is an object of your attraction or repulsion, the reaction immediately happens. Either you're going to feel hot or cold. You're going to feel joy or sorrow. You're going to feel honor or ignominies. One of these two things constantly keeps happening. Why? Because we are never able to control our mind. So where is the Supreme Spirit rooted? It is rooted in the knowledge of the self-controlled man whose mind is perfectly serene. Whose mind is perfectly serene in the midst of the pairs of opposites. The second time Lord Shri Krishna is revealing this truth. Where do you achieve him? Where can you attain Lord Shri Krishna? Where do you attain the oneness with the Divine Lord? What does the yoga mean? Union with the Divine Lord. Where do you find the Divine Lord? In the equanimity, in the state of equanimity, where you're centered constantly. So he's revealing this truth to Arjuna. The Supreme Spirit is rooted in the knowledge of the self-controlled man whose mind is perfectly serene in the midst of pairs of opposites. So if you see something good happening, you're not going to feel elated. If you see something bad happening, you're not going to feel miserable. Both these things doesn't exist, and you're perfectly in that blissful state. That is the state of yoga, that union with the divine Lord. In that state, you're just blissful. There is no reaction happening. You're perfectly serene. Your mind is perfectly serene in the midst of the pairs of opposites. Have I'm sure all of us know the story of Lord Shri Krishna. When the Yadu Vansh was coming to an end, he knows perfectly well, Lord Shri Krishna knows that his entire Yadu Vansh is going to be destroyed. But he doesn't react. He's perfectly serene. There's a very beautiful picture of Lord Shri Krishna sitting in that meditative state just before he has to leave his, that mortal body. And his entire kith and kin, everybody's entire clan has been destroyed. And at that time, he's sitting in that perfect state of, yoga. That is called union with himself, union with the divine. He's lost in his own self. It's such a beautiful state to experience. And in that state, he's just waiting for that body to leave. And have you seen that picture? If you have not, it is there on the internet, or you can see in some of the the stores where you have this portrait or all the gods pictures where they sell. You will find that, and in that state you can experience how beautifully he's lost in his self. He's not carried away by what is happening, because he knows that is how it is meant to be. Everything is perfect in its place. Why do you get disturbed? Why is Arjuna disturbed by the thought that his kith and kin and everybody is going to be killed in the war? The war is meant to be. Why is Arjuna not lifting his bow and arrow and shooting? Why? Because he's given to that infatuation, emotions at that moment in time. That is because of the attachment to the people, thinking it's my children, my wife, my family. They are all my brothers. They are my, teachers from who I am learned. He's attached to all of them. So that attachment is never going to allow him to, perform his duties. But whereas Lord Shri Krishna he didn't even feel an iota of, oh my God, I should save my people. That was never the thought. On the contrary, he said to everybody, let's go to Prabhasa. We all should go and have bath over there. All of you get ready. Let us all get nicely dressed and go. He knows what is going to be the outcome. The end result is aware. The Lord is aware. But he did not change the destiny. On the contrary, he did what has to be done. And that is why he's the highest. He's called Uttama Purusha. The one who's the perfect being, the perfect man, the only man on this planet, in the entire universe rather. Everybody else is a female. And this is the truth, but obviously people will not understand this. That is why he's called the perfect being, the supreme divine being, the consciousness who understands the truth, is ever lost in his self. He doesn't get disturbed by anything. And that's the truth about who Lord Shri Krishna is. How do you live a life of Lord Shri Krishna? That is why we say the way of life as described by Lord Shri Krishna. And it is the most beautiful way to live, where you are not going to get carried away by what you experience in the material world, because he understands everything is created by Maya alone. They are nothing but illusion. It's just which deludes us. We get lost in that, and then you're completely lost. So where is the question of you attaining God realization? And there's a very beautiful story to that effect. Narad, sage, Narad Muni, right, once went to Lord Vishnu and he says, Narayana, I want to also experience your Maya. Everybody keeps talking about your Maya. What is this Maya all about? Okay. So Lord Vishnu says, really, Radha, you want to experience? Okay. And then Narayana says, he says to Narad Muni, Narada, I am very thirsty. Can you please go get me a glass of water? So Narada goes to the river, and then he is going to get a glass of water to Vishnu, remember. And when he goes to the river, he sees a very beautiful lady over there, and he falls in love with her. He gets married to her, and he has children. And then in the village, they're living a very happy married life. And suddenly Narad Muni, there's a flood over there and everything is getting washed away. His wife, his wife gets washed out in that flood, and then Narad Muni is trying to save his children. There is a temple, that we say it's called the Gopur, the architecture, which is sorry, I can't remember the English word. I apologize. It's called, in Tamil we say Gopuram. So he's holding to that. And then he's trying to hold one of his child, because the other child also gets washed off in that flood. So he's trying to hold him, and he's unable to save, because the water level keeps rising and rising. And then that son of his also gets washed away in the flood. And then he's then saying, Narayana, please save me. It is such a funny thing. Everything has happened. Imagine, he's got married. He had his 2 children, and they all got, they all died in that flood. The flood washed them away. And then he's holding on to this, the top of the temple, and he's calling out to Narayana. And then, Narayana then calls out to Narad Muni and says, Narada, where are you? I'm waiting for the water. And suddenly, Narad Muni wakes up and he's like, oh my God, I came here to take the water. What happened to me? So do you understand? Narad Muni had a experience of what Maya meant. And then, he goes to Vishnu, and that's Narayana, and then offers him the water. So Narayana asks him, so how was my Maya? So Narad Muni says, oh my God, thank you. And he bows down, says, thanks for the experience. I don't want it anymore. This is how it is. It's a very powerful thing to experience, that you feel so real. Until the time Vishnu, that's Narayana, didn't call out to Narad Muni, Narada, please give me, bring my water. I'm waiting. I'm very thirsty. Narad Muni was lost in that the illusion of Maya. So what happens? It's a dream, right? He just met a beautiful lady near the river, and that is it, gone. So that's the power of Maya, which cannot be described adequately by words. And till the time you don't realize God, it is very, very difficult to understand the power of this Maya. So Lord Shri Krishna is saying, don't get carried away with all of these things. You are here to serve a purpose. Just focus on that. And by doing that, you will ultimately attain the supreme goal, which is nothing but God's realization alone. And so he's saying, the Supreme Spirit is rooted in the knowledge of self-controlled man, whose mind is perfectly serene in the midst of pairs of opposites, such as cold and heat, joy and sorrow, and honor and ignominy. And this is something we have to practice. We should not react to things. See, as a human body, we have come with our own tendencies. Many are from our past, many lives, previous births of ours, and some of them are acquired tendencies. So what you need to do is to control them, to overcome them. But the problem happens when you actually encounter. You might like somebody, you might dislike somebody, but how do you not allow your mind to dwell? See, this is something I've been teaching. When the sense comes in contact with the sense object, what happens is, even before you've realized, your mind has already come into play. Means your mind has started dwelling in that sense object. The one way to control, in a sense, you should not even allow your mind to dwell on the sense object, because that's the mind's job. See, if you don't consciously observe how your mind is reacting, then you're not going to be able to attain this state of equanimity. It's next to impossible. But the moment you practice, you control, you are conscious that now my mind is going to react. Either it's going to feel elated, or it is going to feel, oh, I don't like this. The two things can happen. So what is the feeling that the mind is going to create. You have to stop yourself consciously from not allowing your mind to feel that. How do you do that? Very simple. Divert your mind to something else. If you don't like an object, your mind's job is to irritate you more. You know how? It's going to tell all the wrong things, things that you're not going to like about that object. It's going to give more, thoughts about it. It's going to give you the chains of thoughts that is going to make you feel angry. So why dwell? Don't allow those thoughts to come at that moment in time. Divert your mind. Go watch something that you like the most. Read a book. Do something to just divert your mind from that state. Otherwise, what happens is your mind will dwell in that sense object, then comes attachment, from attachment comes desires. So then you are gone to ruin. That's exactly what happens. Then the state of equanimity of mind doesn't exist at all. So where is the question of attaining the Supreme Spirit, which is actually rooted? See, again, this is the second time Lord Shri Krishna is saying, where do you actually find him? This is the secret he's revealing. He actually had taught us this in chapter 2. And now once again he's telling Arjuna, please remember, I am, the Supreme Spirit is rooted in the knowledge of the self-controlled man whose mind is perfectly serene amidst of pairs of opposites. It is nothing but the state of equanimity. And if you remember, he says to Arjuna, strive to practice the yoga of equanimity. Why? Because that is where you can achieve Lord Shri Krishna. Lord Shri Krishna, to attain him is not such an easy thing, because he is never disturbed. He is never disturbed by anything in life. He just knows that is a play of Maya. Everything is perfect in his world. And it is, see, everything is predefined. Everything is programmed. How things has to happen is already programmed. In one of the chapter, he's going to tell Arjuna, Arjuna, the enemies already stand slain by me. You just have to lift your bow and arrow and shoot. Why are you telling I'm not going to fight? That is stupidity of Arjuna's. So, what we need to do is this very simple, is that how do you control your mind? Controlling the mind is with you alone. In chapter 2 again, Lord Shri Krishna told Arjuna very clearly, you be self-control. Here also again he's saying, the Supreme Spirit is rooted in the knowledge of a self-controlled man whose mind is perfectly serene in the midst of pairs of opposites. So what is the two things we have to practice? Strive to practice the yoga of equanimity. So sadhana is a must. Again, how do you do sadhana? Self-effort. Waking up is your problem. It is not the Divine Lord's problem. So you have to put self-effort, the will to do. All these we have been learning. But do we even practice it? No. We don't practice. Why do you think Bhagavad Gita is never understood by anybody? Because we don't want to do these things. Lord Shri Krishna never gives anything on platter. He's saying there is no God outside of you. God is within you. You have to put in your effort to realize this God, to realize me, the Supreme Self. I am within you. And all the power that who I am is within you only. But till you don't empower yourself, how are you going to achieve this? It is next to impossible. And that is one thing we fail to understand. We think that there is going to be magic. There is no magic in this world. Please remember. Magic is there when you put that effort. Magic happens, miracles do happen, but when you put that self-effort alone. And it is all with you. That's why he says, one's own self is a friend of the soul, by whom the lower self consisting of mind, body, senses, and the gunas has been conquered. Who has to conquer? You alone. By how? By making your higher self your best friend. That is your friend, right? And your lower self are the bottlenecks which you have to conquer. See, they're all tool, but it's how you look at it. But if you don't conquer, what happens? His lower self behaves antagonistically like enemy. So your lower self behaves like enemy. Don't you see this? Have you not experienced within your mind? Your lower self is always going to say all the wrong things to you. It is going to instigate you against the divine self. So that is where you have to have your self-control. Use the power of the knowledge that the Divine Lord is has been imparting to you. Having this knowledge, then you cut asunder the ignorance so that you can empower and evolve in attaining that yoga of equanimity and realizing that self, that very self within you, which is none other than the Supreme Divine Consciousness. That is Lord Shri Krishna himself. That is why he is referred to as we always refer to him, Lord Shri Krishna lives like a lotus leaf. What does it mean? The water on the lotus leaf is untouched. Likewise, he lives amidst of everything that's happening in this world. In the perfect state, the serene state is what the Divine Lord lives in. He's lost in his own self. That is why he's also known as the highest of the celibate that exist on this universe. Nobody can be like him. He's married to 16,108 wives. What does it mean? He has been able to conquer all the 16,108 tendency that exists within a human being. So he's called the Uttama Purusha, the perfect man, the perfect being. So he has all the power in this universe. He is the supreme power. And this divine being is us alone, which is there within us, but we don't unravel it because we are attached to our mind, body and senses. So we have our own best friend and our own worst enemy. So who do you want to be is the choice that you have. And here he has already revealed it second time in a row that he can be found in that state of equanimity, where union with the Divine Lord can be achieved. So with that, we will end our satsang here today and we will continue from verse 8 onwards in the next satsang. Thank you for joining the Bhagavad Gita satsang, the way of life as described by Lord Shri Krishna to Arjuna. Om Shri Mahaganapate Namaha. Om Shri Gurudev Datta. Om Shri Sachidananda Sadguru Sainath Maharaj Ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Digambara Digambara Shripad Vallabha Digambara. Om Shri Krishna Guru Nathanatha Shri Guruve Namaha. Om Devi Durgaya Namaha. Om Shri Krishna Arpanam Namastu. Krishnam Vande Jagat Gurum.